Today's podcast is presented by Podgo. Podgo is the easiest way for you to monetize your podcast, providing podcasters with a flat rate for ad space so you always know how much you get when you include an ad from Podgo. I recently joined as a member, and you can too. Apply today to become a member and immediately be connected with the advertisers that fit your audience. That's podgo.co at podgo.co.
And please put unprofessional development in the "How did you hear about Podgo?" That will give us a little finder's fee. Thank you.
Welcome, unprofessionals, to an exciting episode of Professional Development. I'm Tedisco.
And I'm Mealy. And today we have with us Janet LoSole, which is French for your foot, or no?
It's actually Italian for sunshine.
La Sole. Okay.
Lo Sole. We've anglicized it. It's not pronounced correctly. The way you pronounce it is the way we pronounce it. Over the years, it's changed.
Cool. Well, for those of you who don't know who she is, because you haven't read her awesome book, it's called The Chicken Bus. Is that, am I saying that correctly? Do you say chicken bus or chicken boost?
It's actually called Adventure by Chicken Bus.
Adventure by Chicken Bus. There we go.
Yes.
Cool. So, and she is, a world schooler. So, like, prior to hearing you on another podcast, I'd never heard of world schooling. And I said, oh my goodness, that sounds like homeschooling, like the best way it could ever be done. So, why don't you just kind of like catch us up on what that is and how you decided to do it and just like bring us into that
world. World schooling. It's actually very popular. This year, it's not so popular, as you can imagine, because everyone's kind of stuck at home. But world schooling is traveling with your children for educational purposes. And it typically encompasses many, many weeks or many, many months, in some cases years. So you have some world schoolers go to Bali for 3 years, then they'll go to Australia for a couple of months, then they'll end up in Colombia for 4 years. Not all homeschoolers are world schoolers, and not all world schoolers are homeschoolers. So our family were already homeschoolers, and we decided to world school as part of our curriculum, let's say.
Yes.
I think most world schoolers will do they get out of the rat race for a year. Like they'll take a leave of absence or a sabbatical, and they decide they're going to go on this awesome trip. They'll go all around Europe, or they'll go on a safari in Africa, or whatever it is. And they'll homeschool while they're on the road, and then they come back, the kids go back into school. But that's basically what it is. So it's traveling to show your kids the world, get them to learn another language, expose them to another culture. And it usually is an extremely long length of time. Like really the shortest is a year. Like they'll sell their house or they'll rent their house out. It's a huge event. Like it's a life reset event.
Yes. Yeah. And how long did you do it?
We did it for 2 years. The one that the book is about, we did for 2 years. It was my husband got a leave of absence for 1 year. And then the way the union contract works in his school board is you can apply for a second year. So he did that. So we were gone for 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do some people do it for like 10 years? Like they're able to do like life?
What's the wildest one you ever heard of?
I know there's mother-son duo that I think their entire lives are just world schoolers. These are people that are usually digital nomads, or they can work remotely. So they obviously can derive an income somehow. But there's many, I'm on tons of Facebook groups where people world school and they're asking questions and is this a good place to go? And what do you think about that place for a small child? But most of them are years and years into it. Like it's a lifestyle, right? It's a lifestyle. Yeah. And they're showing their kids the world. Yeah.
Do you world school with other people? Like, hey, I'm thinking about going to, Madagascar from June to, September. You want to like hook up and we'll like coordinate and blah, 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 blah.
I can definitely see on the Facebook groups that people are trying to connect with each other. And so there's an awesome like cooperative community down in Panama. Let's all get together for a couple of months. There's a couple of conferences where they'll meet in Mexico and they talk about the world schooling lifestyle. But, families all tend to have different objectives. When they decide to go and world school, and they're from all over the world, right? They're from all parts of the world. So they'll have different financial situations or they'll have different objectives. So they do tend to be like an independent lot. Well, they'll go out on their own and, spend whatever, a couple of months here, a couple of years over there. But I do see on Facebook, and there's even there's one Facebook group where it's like a house swap.
Okay. Yeah.
Someone has a house in, Sydney, and someone has a house in London, and they'll do a swap, so it cuts down on costs.
Yeah.
So
that makes sense.
like we're all communicating with each other.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So, all right, this blows my mind. I got to be very honest, because like I took my stepson to Disneyland once, and we had the whole itinerary ready, right? And not to mention that we went with other people. We had plans and conversations in case we got separated. Like we were on that. So you took you had 2 daughters, right? You have 2 daughters, and you took them to Central America.
Yes.
For how long was it again?
So it was 2. Okay.
For
so
2 years?
So this could be a really long story, but in a nutshell, we decided to go to Costa Rica originally because Costa Rica, that was our comfort level. Costa Rica has an infrastructure there that we felt comfortable with. They've got a sound healthcare system. It's relatively safe. We had talked to people who had been down there. So we were just going to go to Costa Rica and teach. Mm-hmm. And we didn't get the jobs that we applied for. There were 2 schools interested in my husband and I. We're both teachers. We had the phone interview and it was going swimmingly. And then we were informed that our credentials didn't match the positions that were available. Now, my husband had just received his leave of absence. So I was homeschooling, so I wasn't actually employed. But I had my TESOL certification, so I knew I could go down there and teach ESL. He didn't have ESL teaching, but, a trained teacher is golden to places, in other parts of the world. And he received his leave of absence here in Canada because we had every expectation that we were going to get hired by the schools that interviewed us. And then they didn't. He didn't have a job here or there.
Right.
Because he granted leave of absence. That's it. They start to repopulate the position with
So this is every heart attack I've ever had.
This
is my nightmare. I've had this nightmare 5 times. I've
no
woken
job
up in a sweat.
Yes.
Yeah. It was no job. We literally.
And you didn't have a pile of gold somewhere that you could just dig into and sell a few bars to live off of.
McDuck style silo, perhaps.
No, we actually had. There was a bottle of champagne chilling in the fridge for when we got the job. Like we knew we were getting this job.
Nice.
We knew it.
That makes it so much sadder.
We were gonna pop that bottle of champagne and celebrate our victory. And of course, we told everybody. This was happening.
Mm-hmm.
And
you kind of got to tell people you're moving to Costa Rica for a few years. Like that's conversations need to be had.
I know.
I mean, once you make that commitment, you have to go, right? I mean, how do you back out of that?
Tedisco, I know you're not a big sports fan, but they have something here, the NFL draft, where like all the entire world is watching of sports, and the teams are picking who they're going to pick on their team. And there are people who are supposed to go early on, and when they do, the network puts a camera in their house, or sometimes they come to the facility and they sit in this like room with their family, and the camera is on them. And I've seen it.
Reaction shot.
Yes, for the reaction shot when the Dallas Cowboys pick Johnny Smackerface, and then now it's like Johnny Smackerface. All the people thought he was going like top 10 pick. Of course, so he thinks he's going top 10 pick because everyone's telling him that.
Because there's cameras in his house.
And there's cameras in his house. And now it's like pick 35 and no one's picked him. But they keep going to the camera. Here he is again. And he's like, oh. So that's what's going on in my head with you. It's like, okay, come on. Like it's going to happen. I'm just waiting for the actual event to happen. Yeah. So
like the Oscars when they put the camera on the person,
yes,
all the people and the person loses.
Right.
We had this bottle of champagne chilling. Then we got the rejection from the school. So we popped it anyway, just to, drown our sorrows.
Because you need some alcohol at that moment. Yeah.
Absolutely needed alcohol. And at the time, cannabis wasn't legal. It's legal now. So it's kind of different. We don't need to go there. But we had to have a serious talk about what we were going to do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we had already decided that one of the objectives of the trip was to learn how to live like the locals.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had already decided that we were going to travel on an extreme budget, because it's one thing to go to another culture and another country and say, oh, look, see how they live. And This is only what they can afford. I really do not like that whole zoo style of travel where you're peering into another culture.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
We didn't want to do that. We wanted to try and integrate as much as possible because that's the way you really learn about a culture.
Mm-hmm.
So we'd already decided to travel on an extreme budget. Now we don't have a job. We don't have a job anywhere.
Mission accomplished.
The travel was actually a good idea. So what we decided to do, we started to do tons of research, and we got talking to people down in Costa Rica, and they said, you guys are totally qualified. You're not going to have any problem getting a job once you're here. Don't worry about it. So we talked about, okay, let's plan to go on an extreme budget and try to travel for a year just based on our garage sale revenue that we were like $18,000 in credit card debt, which was the instigating factor in leaving to go to Central America.
Yes, that way you can stay there in case that you can't pay off that debt. They ain't gonna follow you.
Your debt does not follow you to Costa Rica.
No extradition policies. I get it.
You know what? We never thought of that. But next time, strategy.
Yeah.
So
this is how you world school, boys and girls. You run up $30,000 worth of stuff, have a yard sale, and then go to a country where you can't get.
Let me tell you,
quite frankly, we met expats in Costa Rica that had done that, from the 70s. They split in the 70s, and they're still.
That's funny.
It's much easier to fake your own death in less established nations.
Get away from paying your debt. Oh, for sure.
Yes.
So we decided to sell all of our possessions in order to raise the revenue that we felt was necessary to last for at least 1 year. So he had that 1 year leave of absence, and we're like, let's try to make it work for a year. We sold everything, every fork, every grain of salt. The only thing we didn't sell was our house. So we rented it out because that could cover the mortgage. We took a little bit of money against the mortgage. We sold all our cars. We sold everything. And that allowed us to travel for 1 year. Then when we got down there, we backpacked for a few months, and then we did find jobs. So we were able to do that second year. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Wow. It just... Time out. So how did you not fall into the fetal position and cry forever? Like, I would be so scared. Like, I do not have that level of bravery to be able to do that. Like I can't even comprehend. It's wild.
Did you hear the part about the champagne? Well, okay. So I actually put this in the book. I put this in the book in the epilogue. I talk about there's some practicalities that we adopted that we thought would help other families who are trying to consider world schooling. And one of the things that we hear often is this, what you've just mentioned is how do you cope emotionally and psychologically with that level of financial insecurity? And we actually spoke to each other. My husband and I said to each other, if we really believe that we're trying to do this to show the girls another culture, including the fact that they live within a very different set of financial resources than we do here in Canada, that means that we have to embrace this financial insecurity because they do down there. And at the end of the day, our financial insecurity is nothing compared to their financial insecurity.
Yeah.
So if you think about, okay, he was granted a leave of absence for 1 year. So the worst case scenario was that we did not have any income for 1 year, and he comes back and gets his really good paying job back.
Yep.
We could get over ourselves when you think about it that way. The other thing is, because I was homeschooling, we were really used to being broke all the time. I mean, we were only living on one salary anyway. We were kind of accustomed to financial insecurity. We had just bought a house after the first baby was born. And what I put in the book is the financial insecurity did not really require bravery as much as a strategy.
There you go.
So we had to come up with a strategy. Okay. So I talk about in the book, the reason behind the decision to travel was based on how we had all this debt and how do we deal with our debt. And my husband said, let's pick up night school contracts. So he's working day school. Now he's teaching night school. Now I'm teaching night school. We are homeschooling these kids. We're hardly spending any time together. And we're like, this is absolutely not how we want to live. The whole idea behind the homeschooling was to have all this family bonding.
Yeah.
Nothing was working. So then we started working all these hours, and then we're still not getting out of debt because the car always breaks down. The furnace always blows up. Like things always happen in life, right? But we always had this sort of policy between us as a couple, where when we sort of got into these ruts, we would go to a list system. So we would write down on a list the things that we wanted to accomplish. Then we would give them to the other person, and then that person could hold you accountable. They could say, you know, how are you going on number 5? It was a way to encourage each other and egg each other on. So we're sitting there with this $18,000 in debt. We're not seeing the kids. We're at our wits' end. So we said, let's go to the list. So each of us said, what is it that we really want to accomplish? We wrote it down. We swapped papers. And on each list, at the top of each list was the same word, travel.
There you go.
So he and I had done a lot of traveling when we were younger. On our honeymoon, we went over and taught ESL in South Korea. We backpacked around Australia. Like, this was nothing new to us as adults. But it was like, once that was there and once we recognized what we really wanted to do, the decision was made. And now we just needed to develop a strategy to put that objective into motion. Mm-hmm. So that's how that was the perspective that we went into the whole life reset.
And did you or your husband speak Spanish?
I took a minor in Spanish at university. Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I also speak French. So it was, once you learn one of the Romance languages, the other ones come quite easily. And I'm, you know what? you can laugh. I'm a language geek.
That's awesome.
I'm a huge language geek. So my degree is actually in French linguistics. Like, who takes French linguistics? Like what does that even mean? I even learned, I took a course where when you look in the dictionary and the word is in brackets in these funny, how you pronounce
the umlauts and the upside down E's for no reason.
It almost looks Russian. At that, I actually took a course and I liked it. Like, I'm Amy Santiago from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Do you know what I'm saying? Total geek. So, awesome. We wanted to go somewhere where they spoke another language.
Right.
So that was important to me, and it was important for the girls to learn another language. Yeah.
Okay. So now we're in Costa Rica. Okay. And we don't have jobs, but you're both teachers, so you've got lesson plans, I guess, of some sort. So what I want to know is, like, what does a world school lesson planning look like, and what are the objectives, and how, do you have like a whole semester planned out? I'm guessing it's probably age specific, but how far ahead do you plan, and what's the lesson planning look like?
Okay, so you're talking about with my kids, right?
Yeah, with your kids. Yes.
Okay.
And the good thing is you don't have to submit these lesson plans to a principal, and you don't have to fill out a certain form a certain way, and make sure that you have to follow IEP or 504 guidelines.
No, make sure your objective is definitely written on the side of your house.
Yeah, there's no standard. There's no standardized test at the end of this trip in Costa Rica.
No. So actually, I've never written a lesson plan in my life as a homeschooling mom. And okay, so homeschooling, and it's the same in the States. North America is very similar. The homeschooling world sort of exists within a spectrum. So you have A and then you have Z. Mm-hmm. A would be homeschoolers that replicate the school system at home. So they're and there's a lot of those right now, because a lot of them are COVID homeschoolers, right? So they're doing around the kitchen table, they're doing 9 to 9:30, they're doing math, 9:30 to 10, they're doing geography, et cetera, et cetera. There are some homeschoolers that always homeschool that do it that way. And then you have the people at the Z end of the spectrum, and they're called radical unschoolers. Mm-hmm. And that's more of a lifestyle. That's like, they can go to bed whenever they want. The kids can eat whatever they want. They can have as much screen time as they want. So we fall within that spectrum, and we fall closer to the Z than the A.
Okay.
But we're not radical. Like, I was pretty picky about screen time, and they were not allowed to eat whatever they wanted, and they had to go to bed at a certain time. Mm-hmm. But when it came to lesson plans, no, zero lesson plans. It was a free for all. They could do whatever they wanted. They could play all day long. They could read books all day long. So when we went on the trip, it was always incidental learning. So if you think about another language, when you're immersed in another language, it's just, the learning just happens by osmosis. Mm-hmm. And Costa Rica is really well set up for that, because they have their philosophy around environmental stewardship is extremely remarkable.
Okay.
And they have so many national parks. So just going zip lining and hiking in the rainforest, we did a whole month stint of volunteering for a turtle conservation project. There are no lesson plans needed for any of that, because all of that is just happening as life unfolds. So no lesson plans whatsoever.
Okay.
I'm sure they were probably asking a million questions a day, because that's what kids always do.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this time it's about the rainforest.
It's if you get a chance to read the book, like there are some wacky things. Like we actually slept overnight in the jungle with an indigenous family.
Wow.
And like I couldn't even, and those things sort of like opportunities presented themselves. So like I said, we really tried to integrate into the community, and we found an organization that supported the indigenous community through microloans. And one of the things they did was they introduced you to a family, and if things went well, the family would invite you to their home in the jungle. There was a swath of land that the government protected for the Bri-Bri, B-R-I. That's the name of that indigenous community. And you pay them a little bit of money, and they host you in their homestead.
Okay.
And
could you describe their homestead to us? Because like I'm sure people are imagining everything from just like a concrete like lean-to a hut to something just really wild and exotic. Like how would you describe it?
So the organization was on the Caribbean side of Costa Rica, and it was in a fairly populated community, but it was right on the edge of the jungle. So the indigenous would visit this organization, quite often. And most of the indigenous lived maybe within 30 minutes to 60 minutes from this particular organization. So we would meet up at the facility, and then we would hike sheer uphill in the jungle, in the rainforest. And this family kind of adopted us. They're wonderful people. I think they had 5 kids. Walked us up into the jungle, and he had a beautiful piece of land there, and he had built raised platform, like bamboo cut lengthwise. So the surface was kind of undulating, and it was open air, but there was thatched roof.
Okay.
And they had 2 of those. So they slept in the whole family slept in one, and our whole family slept in another. And in theirs was fairly big because they had a lot of people in their family, and they even had carved out of the rock like a slanted sort of an area, and they had like a concave area where they built a little fire. I don't know if you're familiar with a rocket stove, but it was kind of neat engineering, and they had like a cook fire there, and like stream there for washing. They even had a jungle toilet. I have a picture on my website of the jungle toilet. Basically, it's just bamboo laid out over top of the pit with a hole, and that's where your deposit goes. So really up. But it was really beautiful. Like it was really well maintained. They had all these pathways, and the mother was actually a master herbalist. So she had like this herb garden.
Oh, cool.
They had like they had pigs and chickens running around, and my husband he's a real environmentalist and a nature lover. So when this opportunity came up, he's like, oh, we're totally doing this. Meanwhile, I'm like freaking out, like, oh, we're going to go in the middle of the jungle for a night. Yeah. Everyone's wearing their boots up to their knees and hip waders or whatever. Right. I was freaking out.
Yeah. Cause there are lots of snakes and spiders and
critters, right?
Right. Yes. Things anyway, I've never heard of. Yes.
We slept overnight in the jungle, and he said, oh, it's going to be great. We're going to be serenaded to sleep in the jungle by like birds. No, it was the cockadoodle doodling, and it was the pigs snorting. It ended up being, those guys do that all night long. Those roosters. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh. Anyway, it was an experience and a half. So you don't need lesson plans when you're, living the life like that. Right.
Wow. So in my mind, it's like, and I know I'm dating myself so horribly. I'm 51. It's like half Swiss Family Robinson and half Gilligan's Island kind of like, and I don't know why I have to be obsessed over this stuff, but they had access to some certain, I don't know, lack of a better word, like Home Depot type materials that they could get in terms of nails and hammers and stuff like.
It was very isolated and very remote. They did all of that construction that I described was done by themselves.
What tools did they have?
I'm not exactly sure about the tools, but they would lash things. Mostly it was lashed.
Okay.
Lash with vines or whatever. There were materials that they had to transport. I don't know how they did it because we had to hike uphill. I don't know the numbers of the Bri-Bri that live in that area, but they're all know each other and they're related. So they would assist each other with building these, they're called ranchos with the bamboo floors that are undulating, and they're very big actually. And,
I feel like I'm being world schooled right now, by the way. Because I'm really curious. I'm really curious. And, so no PVC pipe, no 2x4s even, right? None of that. No nails, no screws, no zip ties, anything like that.
I don't know about the nail screws. I have to admit, I don't remember looking at that, but no, there was no plastic. No, no, they lived off the land.
There was a Starbucks.
Yes.
But those things are everywhere.
You know what's great about Costa Rica is there's not, I mean, it's been a while since we've been there. So someone may call in and say, yes, there's a Starbucks in San Jose. But actually, it's interesting that you say that. Throughout the region, we were actually quite pleased to see the lack of corporate presence, which was what we wanted to show the girls. Like what I say in the book, this is one of the most important themes in the book, is called community-based travel. Like I'm involved with a couple of organizations, like there's Impact Travel Alliance and there's Sustainable Travel. One of the things that they talk about and promote constantly is when we travel, we can travel for good. Because often when we travel as tourists, it's very damaging to the communities that we go to, not just from an environmental standpoint, but they talk about economic leakage. So economic leakage describes the amount of money that stays in a community so if you pay $100 in a community for something, a service, a hotel room, whatever it is, how much of that money actually stays in the community? And typically only 5 of those dollars stays in the community.
Wow.
$95 goes back to the multinational corporation from
that's
New
running
York
the hotel or the
London.
whatever. Yep.
And so you can see this year how there's been benefits and negatives of the pandemic. So the positives have been obviously for the environment, but the negatives are people don't go to these communities. And what we try to say to people who are advocating for community-based tourism is when you do travel, always support the mom and pop shops, always go to the independent businesses. And this is a really easy and clear way to support the developing world. So yeah, the corporate presence, it was even when there was the odd McDonald's. I mean, very rarely, but we avoided those like the plague because we wanted to support as many people as possible when we were there.
Now, did the Bri speak their own language? Or do they speak Spanish?
No, they spoke Spanish.
They spoke Spanish. Okay.
They spoke their own language with each other, but they were fluent in Spanish.
In Spanish, okay. So now I know, like there's teachers out there screaming, yes, they should write like an essay about their experience or product that they produce as a result of this to do that. And does that happen organically? Do you try to guide your children in that direction? You completely go, if they're not interested in it, then I'm not going to make them write a diary or take pictures or write about it or send a letter back to grandma about the Bri and the bird and the pig or whatever it is.
So unschooling is, because we fall towards that end, but unschooling is always child directed. So if a child is interested in writing a diary entry or interested in writing to grandma about their experiences, then you support that. And, do you need some paper or do you need help with spelling or whatever it is? I'm a talker, like I'm half Italian, so I'm pretty chatty, and I have 2 girls. So, my husband's like left out on the side because, he's a man, and 3 of us. So there's constant conversations, and often those conversations revolved around what we were seeing. And I was pointing things out a lot. So an example is in Nicaragua. So Nicaragua is the second poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. So there's Haiti and then there's Nicaragua. And there are some places it was obvious that they were this poor. So some of the cities that we went to, it was clear that the people were in very dire need, quite frankly. And sometimes it was children. The girls noticed that. They started asking about, because there were a lot of people coming up and asking us for money. They're asking us for our drinks, which we gave them like immediately. Yep. That's where the reflection came in. There was a lot of conversations. And I even remember we were at some really interesting archaeological site in Panama, actually. And this woman had a dog, a Dalmatian, and the one leg was like stuck 90 degrees out to the side. Ugh. And so I asked her what happened. She said, gotten in a car accident and now it just hobbled around on these 3 legs. And later on, my daughter asked about it. She goes, why don't they get the leg fixed? And I said, they probably don't have financial resources to take the dog to a vet. And then immediately after that, she said, I wonder if Santa comes to these houses. She was like 7. So she was putting something together there. What she was observing and she was asking those questions. So that's where the reflection came in. We were just always talking about what we saw around us.
There's so much going on in my brain. And because I think this is awesome. I think this is absolutely amazing and wonderful. And I know there are definitely people who could hear this and be like, yeah, but at what point do they learn long division? you know?
Yeah. What you're asking is homeschoolers always come across these questions.
Yeah.
So even if I just came on and said we homeschool, you'd be asking the same questions. It just so happened that we're talking about this amazing experience we had in Central America. But it's really hard. It's like when you're a vegetarian and you're trying to explain to somebody, what it's like to be a vegetarian and like where to get your protein. It's really hard. If you're not really buying into it, it's really kind of hard to describe how things work. Mm-hmm. But unschooling really is totally child directed. So if somebody's really interested in math, it's not like we didn't introduce them to math. Actually, their dad's a math teacher. So they could see math all the time. They saw him marking his papers. He would sometimes say, oh, look at the textbook. And they would think it's fun because daddy's a math teacher and they'd try to do the lessons. They were exposed to math. They didn't show a heck of a lot of interest in math. So that kind of got pushed to the side. There were other things that they were passionately interested in. So unschoolers would put all of our energy and resources in supporting the interest. Sometimes those interests wane, sometimes they don't. So my oldest daughter was really interested in theater from a young age. So we put all of our energy and resources around developing her as a theater actor. And we rode that all the way to the end. And actually, she just got her master's in musical theater. So that's, awesome. She has zero interest in long division. and like, I'm sure you've heard the argument that in just taking math as an example is that we have tools at our disposal now to help us with math and our taxes and things like that. There are people that are really into math and they become accountants and they become, into math and that they don't have any interest in theater. So that's the unschooling mindset is always, support and put energy into what they're interested in.
Right. And honestly,
100%.
If she decided, and this is the thing that people seem to understand, I think with like the whole pandemic and everyone's like, oh, these kids are behind and all that nonsense, which is really, there's nowhere ahead or behind. You know what I mean? And I'm glad we have you on here because I'm sure you agree with that completely. If your daughter decided, she's how old now?
The one that's in theater?
Yeah.
She's 23.
Yeah. If she decided that for some reason she wanted to learn long division, she could probably learn like 5 years of math in literally 6 months as an adult and be fine. If at some point she really needed, like, 5th grade through 10th grade math, I could take any, I'm a math teacher, I could take any 25-year-old and in 6 months, I could teach you every concept in math that you would ever need from 5th grade to 10th grade. And that would be all the math that you would probably need. You probably already knew how to do up to 5th grade math, most likely, unless you just need to drill on some times tables or whatever. And it's not that big a deal. So I definitely,
yeah. And if they're interested in it, interest is the fire behind learning.
Yeah.
Once they're interested in something, it won't take them that long because they're so interested in it. Like try to take a Harry Potter book away from a kid who's really into it. I mean, I used to say to my girls, can you stop reading at the breakfast table? Because we need to get on with our day. We need to go to the Y. We need to go out. And I remember my older daughter said to me, try and stop me. I'm like, okay, fair enough. If you want to read, like, who am I to say stop reading? You know what it's like when they're passionate about something? It's impossible to get them to stop.
Mm-hmm. And for people who think that education is just isolated to a classroom, they forget that. And it's so easy to lose track of that. But I mean, I've had so many conversations with like little kids who just ask me questions about math. Like because they're just curious about everything in the world. Like, okay, well, if I have 5 of these, then you have 5 of those, and everybody has 5 of those, and that's 25. I'm like, yeah, that's called multiplication. And like, there's a logical way to introduce that into their world because it's something they're going to be consistently interacting with. And yeah, they're probably not going to be introduced to all the tertiary nonsense and know when Emily Dickinson died, but who cares?
But they might be if you really get into like Emily Dickinson, and you want to find, where did she grow up? What was her family life like? Or musicians, and go, well, what music did this person listen to? Why did they write this? My family's super into, my wife in particular is super into, Hamilton. We're kind of late to the party, but she's eyeballs deep in Hamilton, and she spent like 2 hours yesterday Wikipediaing every character in Hamilton and finding out what was really so-and-so and who was so-and-so really married to and what was their life and all, and just, it's like, way more than she knew about the founding fathers and 1776 through 18 whatever than she ever was able to learn in however many years of high school. And the other direction she can go into Lin-Manuel Miranda and what are his influences and what was all his life and what's he doing next. And
you've basically identified how you can actually generate interest. One of the goals that we had as parents was to expose the girls to as much as possible, but we can't expose them to everything. We don't have a basketball court in the backyard. And we tried. And my husband and I were raised as athletes. And we're like, yes, we're going to be able to ride our bikes together and we're going to, teach them how to play basketball. We're going to go to the Y. They had no interest. They're fit. They're both dancers. So they're fit, but they didn't have any interest. So when they got into, especially my older daughter got interested in theater, I had like literally no clue about anything to do with theater or musical theater, but you can try to generate interest. And that's one of the things we did. The girls didn't come to us and say, we really want to go to Central America and see what that's all about. They wouldn't have a clue that even existed, that those countries even existed. And there was a really good book written called Unschooled, and it's by an author named Carrie McDonald. She's she's prominent in the unschooling community. And she wrote in there that unschooling is like going to the library. So when you go to the library, you can read any book you want. Mm-hmm. And it's like going to a museum. They have all these exhibits and you're really into the Egypt exhibit. So you can spend 4 hours in there. Then maybe you go over to the reptile area. You're not really into that. So you go back to the Egypt area. So it's exposing children to material and then just letting them. So that's why I sort of not as far to the Zen as the radical unschoolers, because I did try to like, why don't you just take a look over here and do you want to maybe try the lacrosse for this summer? I try to expose them to as much as possible, and then when you sort of notice their interest, you're like, okay, they're interested in something, let's go for it.
Right. And that, I imagine, takes a lot of balance, and it's a learning game for you. Just kind of like any teaching is a learning game. It's like there's going to become a time, I'm sure, at which point either tweens or teens, was there ever a point where they're like, well, whatever it is that mom wants me to do, I'm going to do the opposite, or she suggested this thing, and so well, forget that, I'm not going to do that.
This is the famous story. So one of the rules that I had was if I suggest something, you're never allowed to say no. You can say, I will think about it. But you're not allowed to say no. Like, it's like, oh, why don't we try community choir? No, you're not allowed. You don't know if you will like it. Okay. You don't know. You have to say, I will think about it. So we were really broke all through our homeschooling life. We're living on one salary. We had like a couple of crappy computers. The girls only had one computer that they shared between the two of them. And the rule was they could not be on the internet and they had to only do educational stuff on the computer. So one day I went in there to check on them, and my older daughter is looking on YouTube at bloopers of Whose Line Is It Anyway?
Nice.
You know the improv?
Yes.
The improv
yeah.
Show? Yes.
So, yeah.
Okay. So you have a decision to make as a parent. So I'm an unschooling parent. So I'm like, okay, she's interested in this. You have to support their interests, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, how am I going to do this? So I quote unquote caught her on YouTube, and I said to her, are you interested in improv? She's like, yeah, this is the best thing ever. So we're Canadian. So Second City is super famous in Canada.
Yes.
So we've got a branch in Toronto, and there's a branch in Chicago, as you know. So we have the John Candy, the Martin Short, the Eugene Levy.
Yes.
We have all these
please don't.
Really
I could talk for 20 hours on Second City TV. I grew up watching Second City TV. It's like they had the all-stars of the comedy world all be at the same place at the same time. It's ridiculous who was on that cast.
And it was clean comedy, and they never made fun of anybody. But,
they made fun of some people. They made fun of celebrities.
If you live in Canada, they made great fun of our prime ministers. Fantastic.
Yes.
Right, but politicians aren't people, so I think what she said is still correct.
Yes. I can't remember how Double Entendre Days of the Week got, because that was a little...
Oh, don't get me started. Don't get me started. I will just crack up laughing right now.
Days of the Week.
My dad's name is Rocco. And do you remember the villain?
Yes.
Rocco.
Yes, the leather jacket.
Funniest thing that he was the typical bad Italian guy.
Yes.
Oh my God, he just loved it.
So
Hold on,
dumb.
nobody laugh until I Google what all of that means.
Yes. Oh, you never saw Second City Tedesco?
I've seen improv shows at Second City in Chicago.
Do you know the cast? Oh my God.
So in Canada, the Second City became SCTV, Second City TV. It ran for years and years. It won all kinds of Emmys, and the alumni are the who's who of the improv world, right?
John Candy, Martin Short, Eugene Levy. Yeah. Catherine O'Hara,
Andrea Martin,
yes,
Rick Moranis, Harold Ramis,
Rick Moranis, yes, the
Bob and Doug McKenzie. Yeah. Oh
yes.
God, you guys, you're honorary Canadians right now.
Yes.
So I said to her, basically, I said to her, if you like improv, my philosophy has always been, if you can afford it, get your kid the best mentor or trainer that you can afford.
Cool.
And so I contacted Second City down in Toronto, and they have a massive training program there. And they had a training program for kids. And it was in the summer. This happened in the summer. So I phoned them and they're like, yeah, we have day camps. We have improv day camps for a child her age. So my husband, who's a teacher, wasn't working because it was the summer. So he got up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and him and my daughter would take the train down to Toronto, and she went to Second City improv classes for the entire week. Absolutely loved it. Blew her mind. So skip ahead a couple of months. I noticed in our local paper that there's an organization that was producing Jesus Christ Superstar. And I said to her, if you really want to learn how to be a performer on stage, it's worth it to learn all different facets. And they were looking for volunteers to do set design and props. And I said, it's not exactly performing, but you're learning what's going on backstage. She told me years later that she forced herself not to roll her eyes. Because remember I said you're not allowed to say no. Right. You're only allowed to say, think about it. Mm-hmm. So she knew not to say no. So the whole family goes to the information session and they present this idea. We're going to do this play. It's going to be all about the environment. We need set design. We need people to help with props. And we also have not cast it, but when we cast it, so then her eyes got a little wide, right? Mm-hmm. So then later on I said to her, do you want to try out for a part? And she's like, yeah, I think I want to audition. So both daughters auditioned and got fairly prominent roles in the production. That's it. Her life changed.
Right.
I mean, she's got her master's in musical theater now.
Wow.
So when I see a child looking at Whose Line Is It Anyway? Improv bloopers on YouTube, you never know where that's going to lead, right? Down the line.
That is fantastic.
So you're just sort of going with the flow.
That is really, really cool. So you said you went to Costa Rica, you sent to Nicaragua. What are like the top 3 places and why that was the best, part of it for you, your family, or just the educational experience, or for whatever reason, you just always end up talking about that spot again and again?
So originally we had decided to go to Costa Rica as I described, and then we didn't have a job anywhere. And we said, we're going to go for 1 year, try to survive on the garage sale money. We went down to Costa Rica and we backpacked for quite a bit. Now the visa laws in Costa Rica are, you can only be there for 90 days. Then you have to leave for 72 hours before you can come back. And that meant that we had to exit to Panama. So Panama and Nicaragua, for people who aren't real good with the geography, those are the bordering countries. So we could either go to Panama for 72 hours or Nicaragua. So we went there a lot. We went to those 2 countries a lot. And after a few months, in fact, we were in Panama City at one point, and we got an email from a school back in Costa Rica that wanted to interview my husband in person. So pack up our bags, and from Panama City, we go all the way back up to Costa Rica. He ended up getting a job at a private school, which allowed us to rent out a little house in a little village, which was perfect because we wanted to learn how to live like the locals. So we lived right in a community. We avoided all the expat areas. We stayed there for a year, but every 90 days we had to leave. My husband didn't have to because he was legitimate at the school. But he came with us because I didn't want to go by myself with 2 kids,
right.
in Nicaragua. So we did, we spent a lot of time in both of those countries. So we were traveling on between $600 American a month for 4 people. So It ranged from $600 a month to $1,500 a month. And it depended on the country we were in. So Mexico's a little more expensive. That was $1,500. Guatemala was super cheap. So we could go down to $600. And that was more than what the locals were living on. And we just couldn't do it. Yeah. I mean, we just couldn't do it. We tried really hard. My husband was making $700 a month American, and that was high because it was a private school. And we barely were able to meet our expenses, but any excursions, we had to go into our garage sale money. So when we did our border runs, we'd either camp or we'd stay at hostels, and we would always run into college students because they also travel on an extreme budget. Mm-hmm. So we were running into all these college students, and they were saying, you have got to go to Honduras. You've got to go to Guatemala. We had no intention. We were going to stay to Costa Rica, and we were going to go to Panama and Nicaragua, and then we were going to fly home. And they're like, no, you got to check out the whole rest of it. So we ended up down doing a lot of Panama. We did the entire Costa Rica. We did all of it. We did quite a bit of Nicaragua, and then we went up to Honduras, Belize, over to Guatemala, up to Mexico. And of all of those countries, for sure, Costa Rica is number one, with number two tied at Panama and Nicaragua.
Okay.
And mostly it's because of the connections we were able to make with the people. So Costa Rica stands out because it's got an infrastructure. They've got the national park system. They're developed enough that they kind of cater to the tourists. So we were able to take advantage of them having like the public works and the infrastructure. But Panama is so interesting. And Panama gets shafted because when people backpack in Central America, they land in San Jose, Costa Rica, and then they make their way north to Cancun, and then they fly home from Mexico. Mm-hmm. Panama is like this weird ribbon of land. And if you go all the way down to Panama City, it's so far to go to Costa Rica, and there's really not much to do. So when I convinced my husband to go to Panama City, we were glad we did, because Panama City is the most amazing city. Even the canal, even if you do nothing else but just go see the canal, it's fascinating. Like, what a feat of engineering. Yeah. When we went, there was a yacht. So there's two locks. Mm-hmm. And in the one closest to us, there was a yacht. And in the one furthest away, there was this huge cruise ship from like Norway or something.
Right.
And it was the biggest thing I had ever seen. And then we go into the museum, and then they, over the loudspeaker, they're like, there's another boat coming through. So we rush back out. There's bleachers. So you can just sit in the bleachers and watch this happening.
Oh, that's cool.
This like massive container ship from China comes through, and it dwarfed the cruise ship.
Wow.
Easily. Like, I couldn't even get the entire ship in my camera. Like, it was impossible to fit in with the huge, what do they call those? The containers.
Right. Yeah. The little things that they like go on the ship and then on the back of a truck, and people make houses out of them now.
It was absolutely massive. So, I mean, that was just so interesting. And Nicaragua, same thing, those connections that we made with people. But Nicaragua is really interesting because they are very open about what happened to them during the war. They're very open about their history. So like I described before, they really do suffer from very severe poverty. So they would have like blackouts, water outages. So you had to cope with that. At the same time, they have, like, especially the city of Granada, it's a very cultural city. So these art galleries and orchestral performances and museums juxtaposed to not having any water and no electricity. Yeah. Very interesting. Then there's a very iconic image all over the country of this young woman who she's breastfeeding her baby with a rifle slung over her shoulder. This is an iconic image from the Contra War. Mm-hmm. So it's fascinating. The whole thing is fascinating. So those are our three.
Okay.
Those are our three places.
I realize now as I'm talking to you, and I don't know if I've shared this on the thing, that I was world schooled for a month. Did I tell you that to this guy?
Where?
No.
So it was 1976. It was our nation's bicentennial, 200 years since we had become free from stupid King George. And
not stupid, just crazy.
Yes. So, sorry about that. But anyway, so my dad said, hey, we lived just outside Philly, and my dad's like, everyone's gonna be coming to Philly for the bicentennial. Let's get out of here. And he's like, he had a friend he'd gone to high school with who lived in California, and he had other friends at various places in the country. He's like, I don't know, 5 or 6 different contacts that have said to him through high school and college, hey, if you're ever in blah, 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 come see us. And he said, hey, guess what we're going to do? We're going to load up station wagon. We were like the Griswolds from Family Vacation. So we had this land yacht of a station wagon, a 1972 Ford, whatever it was. At 7 years old, I wasn't very tall, but I could lie down in the what we called the backpack behind the back seat. And my mom was like a stay-at-home mom, and he was a school teacher, and he said, we're going to drive to California. And the first stop's going to be West Virginia, and I'm not quite sure where we're going to go from there. And my mom literally didn't even believe him until he was like putting the stuff in the car. So but we would just drive, and we just had like the maps, and then we would go, and sometimes we would camp out, and sometimes we stayed at a motel. One time, like, my dad was woken up by like wild dogs, or they were outside, and we just, we saw the Grand Canyon, we saw Yosemite, we saw the Redwood Forest, we did, the St. Louis Arch, and we just had and for like a month we just drove. We drove to California and back, and we just had a blast. It's not exactly the same, but to me it was like a world schooling type thing.
This is what I said to Ryan Tibbins on the other podcast: is world schooling doesn't have to be something as outrageous as going to Central America the way we did, or going to Bali for 3 years and then Australia for 4 years. It can be just taking an RV around your own state. You've got national parks down there, and you've got interesting things to see, and Civil War sites and all the rest of it. People can feel overwhelmed and intimidated by world schooling, but it doesn't have to be somewhere exotic and overseas. It can just be what you just described. Yeah.
So, Janet, here's the big question I think we all want to know. What kind of crazy things have happened to you in the world schooling? So, like, we know hilarious things and insane things happen in a normal classroom. So, like, just especially when you're dealing with, small children, but just out in the open world, there's no filter, there's no, guard at the door. Like, you can come across anything in the world. So what's sort of a wild or crazy or silly or ridiculous thing that happened to you while you were out there world schooling?
If you get a chance to read the book, you'll see. I mean, when I think back and I'm like, I don't know what we were thinking. We went to some remote backwaters. There was a place that came into our attention, which was a monkey sanctuary. So there was an American expat in Panama. He found a piece of land that used to be a pig farm, and he was reverting it back to its natural state. So monkeys sort of have this habit where they get up in the morning and in their, I don't know if they're called packs. I don't know what they're called. In groups,
troops.
They travel. Troops, maybe, yeah. They travel.
Good all.
They travel from like area to area where it's an abundance of fruit, and they just sort of, pig out. And then he was reverting this pig farm back to its natural state, and it was on the route. So it was a monkey sanctuary. So you would go and stay. It was so remote. If you wandered into the jungle just off his property, you could accidentally wander into Costa Rica. Like, it was that remote. There's nothing there, no borders, no nothing. Indigenous people all over the place. And so we caught this vegetable truck in this village, and there was no road. The vegetable truck left the village and went down onto the beach. Then there was a thoroughfare, which was the beach. That's what the vegetable truck followed. And he's dropping off indigenous people here and there, and then they disappear into the jungle to go to their community. We went to this monkey sanctuary so we could study these monkeys in the wild, like overhead and eating the bananas and whatever. Then when we left to come back to the village, the vegetable truck was waiting at the village. And then when we arrived at the monkey sanctuary, there was just people. But when we left, it was full of vegetables because it was taking it back to the market. So we were all stuck in this vegetable truck, and it was kind of open air with a frame. And they would lash their burlap sacks of avocados and whatnot in there. So my daughters and I ended up getting a ride inside the truck with all kinds of other people, like indigenous people with their traditional dress on. And my daughter fell asleep on a bag of avocados. But the men had to ride on the outside of the truck, like firefighter style, like hanging onto the frame. My husband told me later, he says it was so crowded on the outside that he only had foot on the bumper for one of his feet. So he had to like alternate his feet because it was,
yeah, you get sore. Yeah.
Everyone was going to the market. So that was Harry Canary. That was like, I think back, I'm like, I don't know what we were
at that point, you have to just think to yourself, like, you're just like, oh my goodness, I'm in a movie. I'm literally in a movie. Like this, this is.
At that point, you think, thank goodness I had daughters. Because a small boy clinging to the outside.
Yes.
The next story is like borderline too much information, but it's in the book, so it's out there in the public.
I'm very excited now.
Yay!
Okay. So we're traveling on an extreme budget, and we don't have a lot of money. We're in Costa Rica. We have to do these border runs. And I said to my husband, one time we do this border run to Panama, we have to go to this city called David, which is spelled like David, D-A-V-I-D, pronounced David in Spanish. And it's well known as being a city of bargains. Even the Ticos, which is the affectionate name for Costa Ricans, they call each other Ticos.
Okay.
They would go to David for shopping because there were so many bargains there. So I said to him, the next time we go on a border run, we have to have a list of things that we need to buy because the bathing suits are falling apart. They're outgrowing their shoes, the whole thing. And so we went to the city and we did our shopping, and okay, I've got a husband and I've got 2 kids and I'm helping them out. And then I said to him, tomorrow it's going to be me by myself because I need to get underwear and bras, among other things. And I'm doing it by myself because I need to focus. So I go into, the first thing I want to get is underwear. So I'm going to the market and they have the big baskets that stalls all this underwear. And I'm like, all they were selling were thongs.
Oh, yeah.
No.
Okay, it's like super hot.
Yes. When in Costa Rica, do as the Costa Ricans do.
No way. I'm a mom. I'm old. I'm a mom. I don't wear thongs.
Me neither.
No judgment against people who do wear thongs, but just wasn't for me.
Only on my anniversary for Mrs. Mealy, I'll wear a thong. Okay.
Really?
So you know what I had to do? I had to buy men's underwear.
Oh, nice.
That's nice.
And, they were cottony and they were the right size. They covered all the regions
there you go.
that needed to be covered.
Did the vendor give you any strange looks?
No, he probably just thought I was buying them for my husband. He didn't care. And it was like black and gray and all these feminine colors. Yes. But the next thing that happened was I had to buy bras. So that was a little different because I'm not going to get any men's bras. Well, no judgment.
Yes.
But so I went into one of these department stores, open air, and it was like really busy. And they had these workmen were like working up. They were fiddling with the wires or something. And then the street was so busy. And right there is where the bras were, where these men were working and the people going back and forth. And so I found some that I thought might be suitable. So I said to the sales lady, can I try these on? So she's like, She was thinking about it. Then she called over her coworker in Spanish. She was talking to her. I didn't quite catch what she said. And I'm waiting for her to show me where the change room is. And before I know it, they have this bra out of the package and they're putting it up on me and hooking it up. And they're like, perfect. So to paint the picture, the bra is over top of my clothes, top of my clothes.
Madonna. There you go.
Okay. Yeah. So I barely escaped with my dignity intact there. But yeah. What you learn when you travel.
Yes. Well, I grew up just in the suburbs of Philadelphia, and we used to go to a store called Artie's, and their motto was Artie's is for Smarties, and it was like this basically bargain.
Don't like that.
Yes, well, I didn't write it. That's what it's called. Like I said, my mom stayed at home, and my dad was a school teacher, and he's like 10 years in. He wasn't making a ton of money at that time. So we went to like basically what is a discount store. And so my mom would have me like try on, there was no changing room. I would have to try on shorts in the aisle. She's like, quick, there's no one looking. Take those off and put these on. I'm like, what? She's like, no, take those off and put those on. I'm like, sitting on like, and of course another stay-at-home mom, whatever, the housewife, that they called them back in the day, it comes down the aisle and she's like, don't worry about her, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm like 7, here's some strange lady looking at me in my underwear. I'm like, it's horrible. Yeah, so.
There's no getting over that. There's no recovery.
No, it's, I'm like, really? That's what you're doing to me? Okay.
It was a shocking. Yeah, it was shocking. It's like all of a sudden I have this bra over top. I'm like, I don't even know how it happened. It was just so fast.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I'm imagining, you don't need to give us any more of them, but I'm imagining there are quite a few times when you're traveling like that it's, your modesty has to be just whatever, you're going to the bathroom in the pit and whatever else you're doing. Yeah. So, they didn't have Charmin out there in the jungle, right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, and the hostels are, every hostel's built differently, so they have different levels of privacy. But yeah, that's the price of traveling on a budget.
Yes,
not a deal. Yeah,
so. That's awesome. Probably haven't said it enough, but go out there and get the book, guys, and they can get it anywhere. It's on Amazon and all that, right? We'll put a link in the show notes.
Adventure by Chicken Bus.
Adventure by Chicken Bus. Yes,
and that's the name of my website. Adventure by Chicken Bus, and yes, they can go on Amazon and get it, or the website has the links to Barnes and Noble and Amazon if they want to do it that way.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
There's also photos on the website has photos and chapter reviews and maps and stuff. So
nice.
Yeah, I love those photos. Those are so cool. I think this has just been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much, Janet, for being on and talking to us and indulging in our nonsense and our curiosity. And I can definitely see how world schooling can work if this is just all the things that activate in my brain when these things are put in front of us.
Right.
Oh, thanks. Right. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It was great talking to you guys.
Oh, man, we really enjoyed it. All right, you too. All right. And as we always say at the end, stay unprofessional.
Thanks for listening, Unprofessionals. For more information about our guest, please check out our show notes. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And here is a little sample for next week.
How is this going to work?
So do you want to decide that now, or do you want to press record and then figure it out?
Well, I already pressed record, so we're figuring it out, and we're going. So, hey, boys and girls, say hello to Disco.
Hello, Tedesco.
This is the Georgies, and if you don't know why we called it the Georgies, then you need to go back and you need to listen. George is our the patron saint of unprofessional development, basically.
Yes, not Saint George, Saint Georgie.
Saint Georgie, yes,
Correct.
yes. No dragon slaying here or whatever else. I don't know what Saint George. Wait, Saint George.
Limited amounts of dragon slay. Like if a dragon appears, I'm not gonna say we will refuse to slay it.
Yeah.
All right, so the Georgie. So it is. We are approaching the new year.
Yep.
And we figured we would just wrap up our amazing year.
Yes.
Of podcastery.
Yes.
Assorted podcastery by giving out some notable awards.
Yeah. So have we come up with categories for the awards yet?
I think we should do that the most unprofessional way possible, retroactively.
Okay, so we'll just make up categories as we go along.
Yeah.
Okay, so what?
So we're gonna do this in draft format. I think we should all pick our top 5 each.
Okay, so we're just gonna pick moments. It sounds like I think this is kind of like what I'm gathering. We're gonna pick moments from this season, and then we're just gonna pick our top 5, and then we will bestow upon them some type of best this or most this for that moment. Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Oh, then that's what I'm thinking too. We're thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Twinsies.
Yes.
All right. So, would you like to begin our draft by picking?
Let's do a clip show. Bottle episode. Don't forget the clip show.